The transport shuttle jolted as it locked into the docking clamp, and Captain Sarah Chin felt her stomach drop, not from the motion, but from what waited beyond the airlock. Through the reinforced viewport, the Korthani flagship stretched endlessly, a leviathan of bioorganic hull plating that pulsed with bioluminescent veins. Somewhere inside the living fortress, humanity's fate was being decided. "Captain!" Lieutenant Morrison's voice cracked. He was 23, fresh from the academy, and this was supposed to be a routine diplomatic escort. "The tribunal message just updated. They've moved the execution schedule forward 2 hours. Sarah's jaw tightened. Ambassador Kelvin had been in Korthani custody for 6 days. 6 days of silence, no communication, no trial proceedings transmitted as promised under the Galactic Accord. Just a single message 3 hours ago. The human will answer for his crimes. A queen's justice will be served. Stay with the shuttle, Sarah ordered. If I'm not back in 90 minutes, you jump to FTL and get word to Earth Fleet. Captain, regulations state. I know what they state. She checked her sidearm. Ceremonial, not that it would matter against Korthani warriors, but protocol demanded it. This isn't about regulations anymore. The airlock hissed open. The air that flooded in was thick, humid, carrying scents of minerals, and something floral that made her sinuses burn. A Korthani honor guard waited. 7 warriors, each 9 feet tall, their exoskeletons gleaming purple-black under the corridor's ambient light. Compound eyes reflected her image 1,000 times. The lead warrior clicked its mandibles. You are Captain Chin. You will follow. Silence is mandated. They moved through corridors that seemed grown rather than built, walls ribbed like the interior of some massive creature. Sarah counted turns, memorized landmarks, knowing it was futile. If they wanted her lost, she was lost. If they wanted her dead, she was dead. But Ambassador Kelvin had done nothing wrong, and someone had to stand witness. The tribunal chamber opened before them like a cavern mouth. Bioluminescent clusters cast shifting shadows across tiered seating where dozens of Korthani officials observed in perfect stillness. At the chamber's heart, on a raised platform, Ambassador James Kelvin knelt in restraints. His face was bruised, uniform torn, but his eyes locked onto Sarah's with fierce intensity. Stay sharp, that look said. Something's wrong here. Above him, on a throne of living coral, sat Queen Vextheri herself. Sarah had seen images, but they hadn't captured the reality. 12 feet of chitinous majesty, crown plates that spread like a cobra's hood, mandibles that could shear through steel. The Queen's compound eyes caught every photon of light, processing information faster than any human neural system. Captain Chin of Earth. The Queen's voice resonated through translation nodes embedded in the chamber walls. You arrived to witness justice. This is acceptable. Your presence is recorded. Sarah's mind raced. Under Galactic Accord, she had the right to speak before sentencing. But timing mattered. Say too much too soon, and they'd remove her. Stay silent too long, and Kelvin would die before she learned why. Ambassador Kelvin's eyes shifted right, then back to her. A signal. Sarah's gaze flicked where he'd indicated. A small Korthani, perhaps 4 feet tall, partially hidden behind a guardian's leg. A child. The young one's antenna twitched erratically, and its carapace showed stress pattern discoloration. The human James Kelvin stands accused, Queen Vextheri declared, of corruption of innocence, of exposure of reproductive obscenity, of deliberate psychological contamination of a royal offspring. Sarah's breath caught. Reproductive obscenity? Kelvin was a career diplomat, father of 3, grandfather of 2. He'd spent 40 years building bridges between species. The evidence is preserved, the Queen continued. One massive claw gestured, and A holographic display materialized. It showed Kelvin in what looked like a teaching garden, surrounded by young Corthani. His hands moved in gestures. The display had no audio. "Princess Samara, approach," the queen commanded. The small Corthani emerged, moving with visible reluctance. The child, Princess, kept her head lowered, antenna pressed flat against her carapace in what Sarah's cultural briefings identified as shame posture. "Tell the court," Queen Vextheri said, voice carrying harmonics that made Sarah's teeth ache, "what the human revealed to you." The princess's mandibles quivered. "Mother Queen, I asked about human reproduction." The ambassador answered. He said humans, they don't lay eggs. They don't divide. They don't use spawning pools. The princess's voice dropped to barely audible. He said humans grow offspring inside their bodies. That two humans physically merge their genetic material through direct contact. The chamber erupted in clicking, a Corthani expression of disgust. Sarah's heart hammered. This was insane. Explaining basic biology wasn't a crime. The Galactic Accord specifically protected educational exchange. But Queen Vextheri's posture radiated cold fury. "You described the act in detail," she asked. Kelvin's voice rang out, the first word Sarah had heard him speak. She asked if it was true, what she'd heard from other species. I gave her clinical, educational answers appropriate to her developmental stage. I showed her botanical parallels. You traumatized a royal offspring with descriptions of biological horror. The queen's claws scraped against her throne. In Corthani culture, reproduction is sacred, private, conducted through genetic temples with ritual purity. You made it sound violent, physical, invasive. Sarah saw it then, not malice, but genuine cultural chasm. To the Corthani, their sterile, ceremonial reproduction was civilization itself. Humanity's biological reality was, to them, obscene. The queen rose to full height. Sentence will be delivered. Protocol permits final words. Sarah stepped forward before guards could block her. Your Majesty, request to speak. Every eye in the chamber fixed on her. The queen's mandibles spread slightly. Surprise or anger, Sarah couldn't tell. Captain Chen, the queen said slowly, you are witness, not defendant. Your words hold no weight in this proceeding. Then, let them hold no weight. Sarah's voice didn't waver. But let them be heard. Because this judgment is about to start a war nobody wants. The silence that followed felt like standing on the edge of an abyss. Queen Vextheri's claws flexed once, twice. Then, with deliberate precision, she settled back onto her throne. You have 1 minute. Speak. Sarah looked at Princess Samara, then back to the queen. She had 60 seconds to save a man's life and prevent an interstellar incident. The wrong words would doom both. She took a breath and began. Your Majesty, I'm not a diplomat, Sarah said, voice steady despite her racing pulse. I'm a ship captain. I transport cargo, navigate hazards, keep my crew alive. I don't know the elegant phrases that smooth over cultural differences. But I know one thing that's true across every species I've encountered. Children ask questions that reveal what adults prefer to hide. Queen Vextheri's antenna twitched, but she remained silent. Sarah pressed forward. Princess Samara didn't stumble into this knowledge accidentally. She sought it out? That tells me she was already confused, already trying to understand something that frightened her. Ambassador Kelvin didn't corrupt her innocence. He tried to give context to fears she already carried. The content itself is the violation. One of the tribunal members clicked. The graphic nature of mammalian reproduction is our reality. Sarah interrupted, knowing she was breaking protocol. Your Majesty, you find our biology disturbing. I understand. But consider what you're teaching the princess right now. You're teaching her that asking questions leads to executions. That seeking understanding is a crime. That truth is dangerous." The Queen's massive form shifted. "Captain Chen, you presume to lecture me on raising royal offspring?" "No, Your Majesty. I presume to point out that we're having two different conversations." Sarah gestured to Kelvin. He answered a child's question with facts. "You're responding to those facts as if they were weapons. But facts don't change based on whether we approve of them." Princess Samara's antenna lifted slightly. Her voice emerged, small but clear. "Mother Queen, the ambassador didn't frighten me. The rumors the other younglings told me frightened me. They said humans were monsters who ate their offspring from within. That human young burst from their parents in sprays of blood and violence. The ambassador told me the truth was less terrible than the stories." Queen Vextheri's compound eyes fixed on her daughter. "You told me you were traumatized." I was confused. Uncomfortable. But not traumatized. The princess moved closer to Sarah, as if seeking protection. "I told you I was upset because you were already angry. Because Ansex Lima said the human was corrupting me. I was afraid you'd be disappointed that I'd asked such shameful questions." The Queen's silence stretched like a pulled thread. Sarah watched realization move across her posture, the slight lowering of crown plates, the softening of mandible tension. A mother recognizing her child's fear of parental judgment. "The princess was protecting you," Sarah said quietly. "From political consequences she sensed but didn't fully understand. Children do that. They carry burdens they shouldn't have to carry because they love their parents. This is manipulation." Another tribunal member clicked. "The human uses the princess to enough." The Queen's voice cut through the chamber like a blade. Princess Samara approached the throne. The young Korthani moved forward, her movements showing the uncertainty of youth. The Queen extended one massive claw, and the princess pressed her forehead against it, a gesture of trust and submission. "You asked the human about reproduction because the other youngling stories frightened you?" "Yes, Mother Queen." "And his answers helped you understand?" "Yes. He said every species has different ways. That there's no single correct method. That Korthani ways are perfect for Korthani, and human ways are perfect for humans. He made it sound normal, not monstrous." The Queen's antenna swept the chamber, and Sarah felt the mood shifting. The rigid certainty was cracking. "Ambassador Kelvin," the Queen said, "you told my daughter that biological reproduction is normal?" Kelvin's voice was hoarse but steady. "I told her that every civilization finds its own reproduction sacred and others strange. That difference isn't corruption, just variety. That understanding variety is what allows species to coexist. Yet you described the physical mechanics in detail." She asked specific questions. She'd been told humans grew offspring in external eggs that we then swallowed. She asked if that was true. I explained that human offspring develop internally, in a specialized organ, receiving nutrients through a connected system. I used botanical analogies, seeds developing inside fruit rather than in open ground. I thought metaphors would help. They did help. Princess Samara insisted. I understood after he explained. Understanding and comfort are different states, the Queen said. Did his explanations make you comfortable with human biology? The princess hesitated. No, but they made me stop being afraid of it. There's a difference between discomfort and fear, Mother Queen. You taught me that. Sarah saw the Queen's posture shift again. In that moment, Vextheri wasn't a monarch weighing justice. She was a mother recognizing her own teachings reflected back at her. Captain Chen, the Queen said, you stated this judgment might start a war. Explain. Sarah chose her words carefully. Your Majesty, humans are watching this proceeding. They know Ambassador Kelvin is here. If he's executed for answering a child's questions with biological facts, Earth will see it as tyranny, not justice. The diplomatic coalition he's spent decades building will fracture. Not because humans want war, but because we cannot accept that truth-telling is a capital crime. You threaten us? No, Your Majesty. I'm telling you what will happen, not what I want to happen. There's a difference. Sarah met the Queen's gaze as steadily as she could. I don't want war. I want both our species to survive the next decade. The galaxy is dangerous enough without us making enemies of potential allies. The Queen rose from her throne, and the entire chamber seemed to hold its breath. She descended from the platform, moving with terrifying grace despite her massive size. She stopped before Kelvin, looking down at him from her towering height. Ambassador Kelvin, do you understand why your actions were seen as violation? I do now, Your Majesty. I failed to recognize how deeply the clinical discussion of physical reproduction would conflict with Korthani values. I should have redirected the princess to Korthani educators. Yet the princess sought you specifically because Korthani educators had refused to address her questions. The admission hung in the air. One of the tribunal members shifted uncomfortably. Princess Samara, the Queen said, did you ask your tutors about human reproduction before approaching the ambassador? Yes, Mother Queen. 3 times. They said such questions were inappropriate for royal offspring. That I should focus on Korthani purity and not concern myself with alien biology. The Queen's mandibles clicked in what might have been frustration. So the human answered questions we refused to address, and we charged him with corruption for filling a void we created. Your Majesty, Sarah said carefully, with respect, this isn't about blame. It's about finding a path forward that honors both species' values. You speak wisely for one who claims no diplomatic training. The Queen returned to her throne, but didn't sit. The tribunal will recess. This proceeding requires reconsideration. Your Majesty. One of the tribunal members clicked urgently. The charge stands regardless of circumstances. The human violated, the tribunal will recess. The Queen repeated, and this time her voice carried harmonics that made Sarah's bones vibrate. We convene again in 1 hour. Ambassador Kelvin will remain in custody but without restraints. Captain Chen will wait in the observation chamber. Princess Samara will accompany me to private quarters. The guards moved to escort Sarah away, but she held her ground for one more moment. Your Majesty, permission to speak once more? The Queen's antenna twitched with what might have been amusement. You are persistent, Captain. Speak. Thank you for listening. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you for caring enough about truth to question certainty. The Queen didn't respond, but as Sarah was led from the chamber, she saw the massive monarch place one claw gently on her daughter's carapace. A gesture of protection, of love. Maybe that was universal after all. The observation chamber was smaller than Sarah expected, with walls that seemed to breathe and floor cushions designed for Korthani physiology. She couldn't sit comfortably, so she stood near the viewport that looked out over the flagship's dorsal surface. Stars stretched endlessly beyond, indifferent to the small dramas of mortals. Lieutenant Morrison's voice crackled through her calm. Captain, you're 20 minutes past your 90-minute window. Should I stand by, Morrison? Things are developing. Developing? Captain, the last transmission I intercepted suggested they were moving forward with execution protocols. Plans change. Stay ready, but don't jump unless I give explicit orders. She caught the connection before he could argue. The truth was she didn't know what was happening. The Queen had seemed genuinely affected by her daughter's testimony, but Sarah had seen enough alien psychology to know that emotional resonance didn't always translate to changed behavior. Korthani honor culture was rigid, built on millennia of tradition. Even a queen couldn't simply dismiss charges without consequences. The door irised open, and Sarah spun to find not a guard but Princess Samara entering alone. The young Corthani's antennae were pressed flat, distressed posture. "Princess, should you be here? Mother Queen sent me. She wishes for me to answer your questions while she consults with the High Council." The princess moved to one of the cushions, settling onto it with the awkward grace of youth. "She said you would help me understand what happens next." Sarah felt a chill. "Princess, I'm not sure I understand what happens next myself. But you spoke to Mother Queen without fear. You challenged the tribunal. I've never seen anyone do that before." "I was terrified," Sarah admitted. "I just didn't let the fear stop me from speaking." The princess's antenna lifted slightly. "Is that a human trait? Acting despite fear? It's a survival trait. I think most species capable of reaching the stars have it." Sarah crouched to bring herself closer to the princess's eye level. "Can I ask you something?" "Yes." "When you first heard the rumors about human reproduction, before you asked Ambassador Kelvin, what did you feel?" The princess was quiet for a long moment. Confused, frightened, but also curious. The other younglings said humans were monsters, but I'd seen Ambassador Kelvin in the gardens many times. He was kind to the plants, gentle with the teaching specimens. He didn't seem monstrous. So I wondered if the stories were wrong. That must have been difficult. Wondering if what everyone else believed might be incorrect. It was lonely, the princess said softly. The other younglings laughed when I suggested the ambassador might not be a monster. They said I was naive, that royal offspring should know better than to trust alien kindness. Sarah felt her chest tighten. Xenophobia wrapped in peer pressure, poison passed from generation to generation. But you trusted your own judgment anyway. I had to know the truth, not the stories. The truth. The princess's antenna swept forward, focusing on Sarah with intensity. "Captain Chen, did I cause this? Did my questions make the tribunal want to execute the ambassador?" "No." Sarah's voice was firm. "Adults made those choices. You asked honest questions. What others did with your questions is their responsibility, not yours. But if I hadn't asked, then you would have carried fear and confusion that might have grown into hatred. Princess, the problem isn't that you asked questions. The problem is that the adults around you couldn't handle the questions maturely." The princess's carapace shifted colors, thought processing patterns Sarah's briefings had mentioned. "Mother Queen is angry. Not at me. At the council members who told her I was traumatized when I wasn't. At the tutors who refused to answer me. At herself for not noticing I was struggling. Your mother loves you very much. She's also the queen. Love and duty sometimes conflict in her decisions." The princess looked toward the viewport. "Captain Chen, will there be war if the tribunal executes Ambassador Kelvin?" Sarah weighed her answer. The princess deserved honesty, but she was still a child. "There will be consequences that could lead to war, yes. Not immediately. Not directly. But trust would break, and broken trust between species is how conflicts begin. Then Mother Queen must pardon him. It's not that simple. Your mother has to balance justice, tradition, politics, and public perception. Even queens can't always do what they know is right if it undermines their authority." "That's horrible," the princess said, and Sarah heard genuine distress in the translation. How do leaders lead if they can't follow their own judgment? Carefully. Painfully. Sometimes badly. Sarah stood, her knees protesting the crouch. "But your mother is trying. That's more than many leaders do when faced with admitting error." The door irised again, and this time Queen Vextheri entered. Her presence filled the chamber, and Sarah instinctively straightened to attention. The Queen's compound eyes took in the scene, her daughter on the cushion, Sarah standing nearby, both alive and unharmed. "Princess Samara, return to your quarters. Your guardians are waiting." "But Mother Queen, I want to now, daughter." The princess rose and moved to the door, but paused beside her mother. She pressed her forehead to the Queen's claw again, then left without another word. Once they were alone, the Queen seemed to deflate slightly, her crown plates lowering. "Captain Chun, I require your honest assessment of a political situation." Sarah's pulse quickened. "I'll do my best, Your Majesty. If I pardon Ambassador Kelvin, I will face opposition from Traditionalist Council members who believe I'm weakening Korthani cultural protections. If I execute him, I damage relations with humanity and potentially validate my daughter's fear that asking questions leads to death. There is no choice that doesn't create problems. With respect, Your Majesty, there's a choice that creates fewer problems. Speak plainly. I grow tired of diplomatic circumlocution." Sarah took a breath. "Execute Kelvin, and you gain temporary approval from traditionalists while creating a permanent enemy in humanity. Pardon him, and you face temporary political opposition while building lasting trust with a species that could be crucial allies. The first choice satisfies today's politics. The second choice secures tomorrow's survival. You assume traditionalist opposition will be temporary. I assume you're strong enough to outlast it, and wise enough to use this incident to push for educational reforms that prevent future conflicts." The Queen's mandibles clicked sharply. "You suggest I use my daughter's confusion as political leverage? I suggest you use this incident as an example of why cultural isolation creates dangerous gaps in understanding. Princess Samara sought answers from a human because Korthani educators failed her. Address that failure, and you transform a potential scandal into proof of enlightened leadership." The Queen moved to the viewport, her massive form silhouetted against the stars. "You are either remarkably brave or remarkably foolish, Captain Chen. Probably both, Your Majesty." A sound emerged from the Queen that the translation nodes rendered as laughter, a deep, resonant vibration. "I begin to understand why humans are simultaneously admired and feared across the galaxy. You combine recklessness with calculation in ways that defy prediction. We call it improvisation. It's usually born from desperation. Then we share that trait." The Queen turned from the viewport. "The High Council is divided. 4 members support execution, 3 support pardon, and 2 abstain pending my decision. By tradition, a divided council defers to royal judgment. What does tradition say about royal judgment in cases involving interspecies cultural conflict? Tradition is silent on the matter. Such conflicts are historically unprecedented in Korthani jurisprudence." The Queen's antenna swept towards Sarah. "We have never before charged a non-Korthani with corruption of royal offspring. The applicable laws were written assuming all parties would share our cultural framework." Sarah felt hope spark in her chest. "Then you're free to set precedent. Free is not the word I would use. Obligated, perhaps? Burdened with consequence." The Queen's claws flexed. "Captain Chen, if I pardon Ambassador Kelvin, humanity must understand this is not approval of casual discussion of reproduction with Korthani youth. Certain boundaries must be respected." "Agreed, Your Majesty." "And if you pardon him, the Korthani must understand that humans will continue to answer honest questions with honest information when asked. We can't lie about our biology to make others comfortable." "A reasonable stance. I propose formal protocols. Korthani youth seeking information about alien species must first consult Korthani xenobiologists, who will provide context-appropriate information. If Korthani educators cannot or will not answer, they must formally refer the youth to approved alien cultural liaisons who have been briefed on Corthani sensitivities. That could work. It creates accountability on both sides. It also requires me to admit that our educational system has gaps, that our cultural protections have become barriers to understanding. The Queen's voice carried weight Sarah couldn't fully interpret. This admission will cost me political capital, but it will earn you respect from species who value growth over stagnation, including humans. And if the traditionalists attempt to remove me from power, Sarah met the Queen's gaze steadily. Then you'll know who truly serves the Corthani people and who only serves their own comfort. The Queen was silent for a long moment. Then her crown plates lifted, a gesture Sarah's briefings identified as resolution. The tribunal will reconvene. You will be present for the final judgment. Your Majesty, whatever you decide, thank you for reconsidering. For listening. Thank your species for producing an ambassador who chose compassion over protocol when a confused child needed answers. The Queen moved toward the door, then paused. Captain Chen, do humans truly grow offspring internally? The entire development cycle within the parent's body? Sarah blinked, surprised by the direct question. Yes, Your Majesty. For approximately 9 months. And this doesn't damage the parent? It can be uncomfortable. Sometimes dangerous. But for most humans, it's a natural process our bodies are designed to handle. The Queen's antenna twitched. Remarkable. Deeply disturbing from a Corthani perspective, but remarkable nonetheless. The resilience required. She trailed off, then seemed to shake herself. Come. The tribunal waits, and I have delayed justice long enough. The tribunal chamber felt different when Sarah entered the second time. The same officials occupied the same positions, but the atmosphere had shifted from certainty to tension. Ambassador Kelvin still knelt on the platform, though now without restraints. His eyes tracked Sarah as she took her position among the observers, and she gave him the smallest nod. Not over yet, but there's hope. Queen Vextheria ascended to her throne with deliberate ceremony. The chamber fell into absolute silence. The tribunal has reconvened, the Queen announced. After consultation with the High Council and reflection on testimony provided, I am prepared to render judgment. Sarah's hands clenched at her sides. This was it. War or peace, decided in the next few minutes. Ambassador James Kelvin, you stand accused of corruption of royal innocence through exposure to reproductive obscenity. The evidence shows that you provided detailed information about human biological reproduction to Princess Samara, information that conflicts sharply with Corthani cultural values regarding reproductive privacy and sanctity. Kelvin's face remained impassive, but Sarah saw his jaw tighten. The tribunal has debated whether cultural education can constitute corruption, the Queen continued. Whether honesty in answering questions can be criminal when the honest answers disturb cultural sensibilities. These are not simple questions. One of the tribunal members leaned forward. Your Majesty, the law is clear, the law is silent. The Queen cut in, voice sharp. The law addresses Corthani corrupting Corthani. We are in unprecedented territory, which means we must rely on wisdom rather than precedent. Sarah barely breathed. After careful consideration, I have concluded that two truths exist simultaneously. First, Ambassador Kelvin's description of human reproduction was genuinely disturbing to Corthani sensibilities, and should not be shared casually with our youth. Second, he provided this information in response to direct questions from a princess who had been failed by her own educators. The Queen's gaze swept the chamber. Both truths matter. The question is which truth should guide our justice. She paused, and in that pause Sarah felt the weight of civilizations balancing on a razor's edge. I choose the second truth. Ambassador Kelvin acted to provide clarity, to a confused child when her own people would not. His methods were imperfect. His cultural awareness was insufficient. But his intent was educational, not corruptive. Therefore, I render the following judgment. Ambassador James Kelvin is found not guilty of intentional corruption. He is guilty of cultural negligence, a lesser charge that carries no criminal penalty under Korthani law. The chamber erupted in clicking, both approving and dissenting. Sarah felt her knees go weak with relief. However, the Queen's voice rose above the noise. This incident reveals serious flaws in our educational system and interspecies diplomatic protocols. I am hereby establishing a Royal Commission on Xenobiological Education, tasked with creating frameworks for Korthani youth to learn about alien species in culturally appropriate ways. Ambassador Kelvin will serve as a consultant to this commission, sharing human perspectives on educational methodology. Kelvin's eyes widened. From accused criminal to official consultant in one judgment. Additionally, the Queen continued, I am mandating that all Korthani educators receive training in handling questions about alien biology. Silence and deflection are no longer acceptable responses. If we wish our youth to navigate a multi-species galaxy, they must understand the galaxy in all its uncomfortable diversity. One of the dissenting tribunal members stood. Your Majesty, this judgment undermines traditional Korthani values. This judgment preserves Korthani survival. The Queen shot back. Traditional values mean nothing if we isolate ourselves into irrelevance or blunder into wars born from mutual ignorance. The galaxy is changing. We change with it or we fade. The dissenter sat down, though his posture radiated disapproval. Captain Chen, the Queen said, shifting her attention, you will carry a message to Earth's diplomatic corps. The Korthani Queendom recognizes that cultural differences regarding reproduction are profound and potentially destabilizing. We propose a joint working group to establish protocols for discussing such matters in mixed species contexts. Will humanity participate? Sarah stepped forward. I believe they will, Your Majesty. I know they will. Then, let this incident mark not the end of Korthani human relations, but a more honest beginning. The Queen rose from her throne. Ambassador Kelvin, you are free to return to your duties. Your service to both our species in this matter will not be forgotten. Kelvin stood slowly, as if uncertain his legs would support him. Your Majesty, I thank you. I'm sorry for any distress I caused Princess Samara. You caused her less distress than her own people did through our refusal to address her questions. That is the shame we must carry. The Queen's gaze softened. She asked to see you before you depart. To thank you for not treating her curiosity as a burden. I will allow this meeting under appropriate supervision. I would be honored, Your Majesty. The Queen turned to address the full assembly. This proceeding is concluded. Let it be recorded that on this day, the Korthani Queendom chose understanding over anger, growth over stagnation, and wisdom over tradition. May our descendants judge us kindly for this choice. She struck the floor with one massive claw, a sound like thunder, and the tribunal was dismissed. 30 minutes later, Sarah stood in the garden where this whole crisis had begun. The space was beautiful in an alien way, plants with crystalline leaves that chimed softly in the recycled air, bioluminescent flowers that pulsed in colors humans had no names for. Ambassador Kelvin sat on a bench designed for Korthani anatomy, looking exhausted but alive. You saved my life, he said quietly. I was ready to die. Honestly thought I would. You saved your own life by being the kind of person a confused child trusted with difficult questions. Sarah sat beside him, though the bench was uncomfortable for human proportions. What happens now? I serve on a commission to help Korthani kids learn about the galaxy without cultural trauma. Ironic, considering I apparently caused cultural trauma. He rubbed his face. Sarah, I keep replaying the conversation with Princess Samara. I thought I was being careful. Clinical. Using metaphors. You were careful. The problem wasn't you. It was a system that left a child with no safe place to ask questions. The Queen basically said the same thing. Doesn't make me feel less responsible. Responsibility and guilt aren't the same thing, Ambassador. You're responsible for your words. You're not guilty for their system's failures. Kelvin was quiet for a moment. How's Morrison holding up? Probably having a nervous breakdown on the shuttle. I should check in. Sarah activated her comm. Morrison update. Captain! Thank God. I was about to stand down on emergency protocols. Ambassador Kelvin has been pardoned. We'll be departing within the hour. The relief in Morrison's voice was palpable. Copy that, Captain. I need to sit down. Take your time. Sarah closed the connection and smiled despite everything. He's good kid. This was a hell of a first diplomatic mission. First? Kelvin laughed shakily. After this, he'll probably request transfer to cargo operations. Nice quiet asteroid mining runs. The garden's entrance irised open, and Princess Samara entered, accompanied by 2 guards who maintained respectful distance. The young Corthani approached hesitantly. Ambassador Kelvin, she said, her voice even smaller than before. Mother Queen said I should apologize to you. Kelvin shifted to face her more directly. Princess, you have nothing to apologize for. But I got you in trouble. I told Mother Queen I was upset, and she thought you told your mother what you felt. That's what children are supposed to do. Kelvin's voice was gentle. The adults made mistakes, not you. But I could have explained better. I could have said, Princess. Kelvin held up a hand. May I tell you something important? She nodded, antenna focused entirely on him. You did everything right. You had questions, you sought answers, and when things got complicated, you told the truth. Those are exactly the actions of a wise person, no matter how young. The fact that adults misunderstood isn't your fault. Captain Chin said something similar. Captain Chin is very smart. Kelvin glanced at Sarah with a slight smile. You should listen to her more often. I wanted to thank you, the princess said, for answering my questions, for not making me feel stupid for asking. The other younglings still say I'm naive for trusting you, but I don't think I am. I think they're just scared to admit they don't understand things. That, Kelvin said softly, is possibly the wisest thing I've heard in 40 years of diplomatic service. The princess's carapace shifted colors, pride mixed with lingering uncertainty. Will you really help teach Corthani about other species? If your mother wants my help, I'm happy to provide it. Good. Because I have more questions. The princess's antenna twitched with what might have been mischief. Not about reproduction. I understand that now. But I want to know about human music. I heard it's made by controlled air vibrations that create emotional responses. Is that true? And if so, how do you control which emotions? Kelvin laughed, a sound of genuine joy that seemed to surprise him. Princess, I would be delighted to explain human music. It's a much safer topic. Is it though? Sarah interjected. Music can be pretty controversial. Different species respond to different frequencies. Captain Chin, please don't give her new things to worry about. Too late, the princess said. Now I need to know about controversial frequencies. Are some sounds dangerous? Sarah and Kelvin exchanged glances, and Sarah saw the ambassador's tension finally breaking. This was what diplomacy was supposed to be. Genuine connection despite differences. Curiosity overcoming fear. Princess, one of the guards called softly. The Queen expects you in 10 minutes. Already? The princess sighed, a surprisingly human gesture. I have to go. But Ambassador Kelvin, when you come back for the commission meetings, will you tell me about music? I promise. With appropriate cultural sensitivity. Captain Chen, will you come back too? Sarah smiled. If my duties allow, I'd be honored. The princess touched her forehead to Kelvin's hand, then to Sarah's, in a gesture of respect and affection. Then she hurried toward the exit, guards following. When they were alone again, Kelvin let out a long breath. Sarah, have you ever had the feeling that you just witnessed something important? Not just personally important, but historically significant? You mean the moment when two species decided not to destroy each other over a biology lesson? Yeah, that feels pretty significant. No, I mean... Kelvin gestured toward where the princess had departed. That child. The question she asks, the way she thinks. If the Queen's reforms take hold, if Korthani youth start engaging with other species the way she does. He trailed off. This could change everything. Not just Korthani-human relations. The whole galactic power structure. Sarah considered this. You think one curious princess can shift interstellar politics? I think one curious princess with a mother who listens absolutely can. The question is whether the traditionalists will let it happen. The Queen seems pretty committed. She is. Right now. While the crisis is fresh and the stakes are clear. Kelvin stood, stretching his back. But memory fades. Political pressures build. What feels right today might feel risky in 6 months. Then, we make sure the reforms produce results before 6 months pass. Create success stories that make reversal politically impossible. Kelvin raised an eyebrow. Captain, you're a ship captain, not a diplomat. I'm whatever I need to be to make sure I didn't just waste 90 minutes of terror for nothing. Sarah stood as well. Besides, Morrison needs more experience in diplomatic crisis management. Can't let him think all missions are quiet cargo runs. Kelvin laughed. The poor kid. All right, Captain Chen, you're officially recruited into diplomatic service. Your first assignment is figuring out how to explain human music without causing another interstellar incident. I can do that. Can you, though? Because I'm pretty sure death metal would traumatize half the Korthani court. Then, we start with Mozart and work our way up. They walked toward the garden exit together, and Sarah felt the last of the mission's tension draining away. They'd succeeded. Not perfectly. Kelvin had been terrorized, Princess Samara traumatized, and diplomatic protocols nearly shattered, but they'd survived and, maybe, possibly, created something better in the process. The Queen waited for them near the main airlock, her massive form somehow less intimidating now. Ambassador Kelvin, Captain Chen. Your transport is ready. Thank you, Your Majesty, Kelvin said. For everything. Thank Captain Chen. She spoke truths that others lacked the courage to voice. The Queen's attention shifted to Sarah. Captain, you offered me no deference, no diplomatic courtesy, no careful phrasing. You simply told me what you believed I needed to hear. That is either profound stupidity or profound wisdom. Probably both, Sarah admitted. I find they often overlap. Indeed. The Queen's mandibles clicked softly. Humanity is going to be a disruptive force in galactic affairs. I sense this deeply. We try not to be. Lying does not become you, Captain. You try very hard to be disruptive. You simply prefer disruption that builds rather than destroys. The Queen extended one claw, and Sarah carefully touched it, the Korthani equivalent of a handshake. Travel safely. Return when you can. There is much work ahead. We will, Your Majesty. As Sarah and Kelvin moved through the airlock into the shuttle, Sarah glanced back one last time. Queen Vextheri stood in the corridor, massive and powerful, but also somehow vulnerable. A leader trying to guide her people toward an uncertain future, knowing that every choice carried consequences she couldn't fully control. Sarah understood that feeling intimately. The airlock sealed, and Morrison's face appeared on the comm screen, looking years older than when they docked. "Captain, Ambassador, welcome back. Jumping to FTL on your order." "Give me a minute, Morrison." Sarah moved to the viewport, watching the Corthani flagship recede as their shuttle disengaged. "Ambassador, what do we tell Earth Command about all this?" Kelvin joined her at the viewport. "The truth, I suppose. That we nearly started a war over sex education, and barely avoided it through a combination of luck and a captain who doesn't know when to shut up. They'll love that in the official report. They'll hate it. But it's accurate." Kelvin was quiet for a moment. "Sarah, what you said to the Queen about me answering a child's questions out of compassion, did you believe that? Or were you just saying what needed to be said?" "I believed it. You could have deflected, referred her to Corthani tutors, protected yourself. Instead, you gave her answers that helped, even though it was risky. That's character. Or foolishness. Like I said to the Queen, probably both." Sarah smiled. "Morrison, take us home." Standard FTL approach. "Aye, Captain." Initiating jump sequence. The stars stretched and blurred as the shuttle's FTL drive engaged. Sarah felt the familiar lurch of space folding around them, the brief moment of disorientation that never quite became comfortable no matter how many times she experienced it. "You know what I keep thinking about?" Kelvin said quietly. "What?" "Princess Samara asking about music. About controversial frequencies. She just escaped a crisis caused by asking difficult questions, and her immediate response is to ask more difficult questions. She's brave. She's curious. In some ways, that's more important." Kelvin turned from the viewport. "If the reforms work, if Corthani start questioning and exploring the way she does, the galaxy is going to change in ways we can't predict." "Good," Sarah said. "Predictable would be boring. Predictable would be safe. Safety's overrated." Sarah moved toward the shuttle's small galley. "I'm making coffee. Want some?" "God, yes. I haven't had decent coffee in 6 days." As Sarah prepared the coffee, real Earth coffee, carefully preserved in the shuttle stores, she thought about the princess's question about music, about frequencies that created emotional responses, about how humans used controlled air vibrations to communicate feelings that words couldn't capture. Maybe that was the key to all of this. Finding ways to communicate the things that formal language couldn't express. Finding frequencies that resonated across species despite differences. "Here." She handed Kelvin a cup. "To controversial frequencies and the brave children who ask about them." Kelvin raised his cup. "To diplomats who survived their own ignorance and captains who saved them from the consequences." They drank, and the coffee was bitter and perfect and exactly what Sarah needed. Through the viewport, the stars blurred past in impossible patterns, and somewhere behind them, a Corthani queen was trying to build a better future for her people. It wasn't a perfect ending. The traditionalists would fight the reforms. Political opposition would build. There would be more crises, more near disasters, more moments of terror where the wrong word could shatter everything. But Princess Samara would keep asking questions. Queen Vextheri would keep listening. And maybe, possibly, that would be enough. Sarah finished her coffee and set the cup aside. "Morrison, ETA to Earth. 48 hours at current speed, Captain." "Good. Wake me when we're 6 hours out. I need sleep." "Aye, Captain." "Rest well. You earned it." Sarah moved toward her cabin, then paused at the door. "Ambassador?" "Yes." The next time a child asks you a difficult question, you're still going to answer it honestly, aren't you? Kelvin smiled. Absolutely. Though maybe with better cultural briefings first. Good. The galaxy needs more truth-tellers, even when truth is uncomfortable. Even when it nearly gets us killed? Especially then, Dot. Sarah entered her cabin and sealed the door behind her. She lay down on the narrow bunk and, despite everything, the fear, the tension, the brush with execution, she fell asleep almost immediately. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new crises, new moments where the wrong choice could spiral into disaster. But tonight, they'd chosen right. They'd chosen truth over comfort, understanding over tradition, and the future over the past. That was enough. For now, that was enough. Point 2/2.